Welcome. The show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. That was the talking heads from the Jonathan Demme film, Stop Making Sense, Burning Down the House, which hopefully will not be happening, but I thought might be appropriate for our show today. My guests are Brenda Temple and Douglas Balder of the Committee for Independent Community Action. Brenda is a LaGuardia alumni, and Mr. Balder is also on the show because they're going to be talking about a petition that they've created that they wish to share with our new New York City Mayor, Eric Adams, concerning not allowing the privatization of the New York City Housing Authority properties, or NYCHA. And that's a long, and I should probably mention how this show came to be, which is that I was at a union event, which trying to get a fair budget for CUNY in front of LaGuardia, and Brenda was getting signatures on the petition at the time. And when I found out that she is an alumni of LaGuardia, I wanted her on my show. But we also thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about this very important work. So welcome, Brenda. Welcome, Douglas. Say hi.
Hello. Thank
Hello,
you for
everyone.
having me.
Good to be here. Thank you, Hugo, for having us.
You got it. And I told you a little bit about the format, so I'd like to start out by letting the audience, learn a little bit about our guests. So why don't you guys take turns telling us a little bit about yourselves, your backgrounds, studies, and things like that. Why don't we start with you, Brenda? You're the alumni.
Okay. Thank you for having me. It was a great opportunity to meet you at this rally. And I'm always involved with marches and rallies for the underserved and the marginalized because I'm one of them. And so you know that I was out there in December at the rally to support free tuition. And I figured that because LaGuardia is my alma mater and I'm alumna for the graduating class of 1977, way back when, I figured I would support them, of course. And being that I'm a resident of public housing, which LaGuardia Community College really afforded me the opportunity to go there and to study from public housing because I didn't have the funds to go to a four-year college at the time. And so right now I am a community activist. I work with an organization called Committee for Independent Community Action. We call it SICA. The founder is Dr. Lenore Fulani, who ran for president in 1988 and was on the ballot in all 50 states. And I think in another year she ran for president on the independent ticket. I met her in Far Rockaway, Queens, where I live now. And she was doing a program called Operation Conversation, Cops and Kids. And I was very interested in the program and how it connected the young people to the police department and likewise back and forth so that we can have a better communication and understanding and relationship out in the streets with the young people and a new perspective on what each does and how we need to live side by side and work together. So basically, I'm a community activist, and I want to give accolades to LaGuardia Community College because it really allowed me a jump start in this journey that I have in my life. So I'd like to say that at LaGuardia, I majored in court stenography course. I wanted to be a court reporter. I was very excited about it, took the course, finished it. It was kind of difficult, but I did it. And during that time, they sent me on wonderful internship opportunities at LaGuardia. I worked at a few law firms and got a lot of experience there. And I even worked at CBS as an administrative assistant, CBS. It was wonderful. So, after the internships were over, I went and I was able to go to their employment center that LaGuardia has, and they set me up with a law firm. And so I worked there for quite a few years. I enjoyed that. But I want to say that during my time at LaGuardia College, it was a wonderful experience. Even though the buildings are in a industrial atmosphere, when you go around there, you know, you see all these big, you know, buildings, and it's not like a campus atmosphere, but when you walk inside, it's a different story, a different situation. And I just loved being a part of LaGuardia Community College and all that it had to offer me. The building inside was like a museum. It's pristine, clean, open and free. The classes, as well as the classes that I needed to take, the major classes, the mandatory classes, as well as the extracurriculars were offered, and I took advantage of that. I was in the choir because I came from high school where I was in the choir, Music and Art High School, and then Long Island City High School where I was in the choir. I didn't get a scholarship, which I should have, but that's another story. But I was able to join the choir at LaGuardia, and we did a production of Fiorello H. LaGuardia, which was a lot of fun. I was also, what did I do? I was a part of the theater group, like I said, part of Fiorello H. LaGuardia. I also took part in a lot of the gym courses that they had. Trying to look and remember, it's been a while. Oh, sign language. I took sign language, and I use that today on my resume. It gets me into a lot of places, and I really enjoy keeping up with my sign language skills and speaking with people with the American Sign Language. So that was a great opportunity as well. And I took a few religious courses, so that was very interesting. Yes.
No, I was just going to say there's a lot of follow-up I want to do with you, but I want to give Douglas a chance also to
okay.
Before we dig deep into your LaGuardia stories.
Okay.
But Douglas, would you like to talk a little bit about yourself, your background, your studies?
Sure, Hugo, thanks. I grew up in Baltimore, left Baltimore in 1972 and went to college upstate New York, studied architecture, and I moved to New York City in 1981 and started my career. At the same time, I met Dr. Lenora Filani. I was looking for a way to express my progressivism. I did not intend to become an activist, but left architecture in '87, went on the road as a field organizer, and worked in Alaska, Hawaii, Montana to put Dr. Filani on the ballot in all 50 states. As Brenda already mentioned, she ran again in 1992. And when those campaigns were over, went back into architecture and spent 25, 30 years in museum design. And continued to work as an activist with Dr. Filani and others. Dr. Filani founded the Committee for Independent Community Action, I believe in 2011. And its mission or its purpose is to help grow, develop grassroots leadership in New York City. We got involved in public housing because Dr. Filani was getting hundreds of calls from residents about the deplorable conditions, and people wanted to know what she thought we all should do. So, and I've been involved since 2011, working with Brenda and many others.
All right. Brenda, I wanted to run a few names by you, and I want to talk a little bit, because one of the things I love to do with folks who, you know, were here in the early days of the college. I mean, I don't know if you know that the college is celebrating its 50th anniversary. And so you were there in that first decade in '77. Do you remember what did the campus consist of? Which buildings? Do you remember at all the buildings that were part of the LaGuardia campus at the time, or what they were like?
Well, you know, I was there for the rally last month, and basically the buildings are there. They're the same buildings that I had gone to classes in. There's the main building,
Right.
Can't remember the address exactly, but that big main building. Then up the street, there are those other buildings that where I took classes, and around the corner where the theater is. So, I remember those. What is new, they have a larger, big, more luxurious library than they had before when I was there. But the library was there, but this library is newer to me because I had gone in, recently, gone inside the building. So I noticed some different changes, of course, during that time.
Yeah, the library's new to everybody. We had it renovated about
Beautiful.
5 years ago. I
Right.
tell them it's as nice as an Ivy League library. I'm going to throw some names at you and see if any of these stick. So, do you remember anyone in the stenography program named Josephine Corso?
No, 19.
Okay, in the for the I don't know if he was teaching here at that time, but during the choir, do you remember a gentleman, Jonathan Williams, John Williams?
John Williams. That doesn't sound familiar either.
Okay, and then finally in the theater program, Will Coolsbergen.
That doesn't sound familiar either. I'm sorry. It's been a
That's all right.
while.
I mean, they may not have been there for all with the history. I'd need somebody from the humanities department to tell me. But interestingly enough, in our humanities department, we have a little poster from that show LaGuardia
Yes.
that when you guys did, and most people don't realize this, that the namesake of the college, they also that there's a musical about him, he and his life,
It was so much fun.
and which was performed on Broadway. I think you remember. I don't know if you remember the guy who played the father on Happy Days. I want to say Tom Boswell, but
Yes.
he played LaGuardia
Okay. Perfect.
on Broadway. So
Yeah.
just a little bit about that. So I
Good
guess
memories.
let's talk about
I would like
Douglas Hall.
to. I can mention a few people that I know from LaGuardia. Recently, I spoke with someone that you might know. Her name is Dr. Sharon Cadiz. I think that she was a teacher there at LaGuardia. Do you remember?
Currently or at some time ago?
Let's see. She was an instructor, Humane Services, Early Childhood Department at LaGuardia Community College. Her name is Sharon
Okay.
Cadiz, and she's a great advocate and civil rights leader. And she is helping us to join the movement in protecting public housing. And she also she wanted me to mention Gerard Forenhofer. Is that the one you had mentioned?
No.
Gerard Forenhofer. He was an instructor at LaGuardia College. And what he did was he took a lot of the students to housing demonstrations to support public housing way back when. He's passed on since then. So those are two that, I can name right now. But like I said, it's been so many years ago. But
That's fine. Yeah, I know. Whatever. I guess if you do the math, it's, what is it, 43 years ago? Longer, 44. But you're touching on. I mean, one of the reasons why I thought it's also important to have you on the show is this issue, which is the role that housing plays in our students' lives, as well as, and you touched on this other point, which is for our students who have families and need help with childcare. The Early Childhood Center, which is still here at the college. It's actually in the old Schenker building, what you call the main building. We call it the M building.
Okay.
The one with the flags in front of it. I don't know the exact address. If I had to guess, I'd say 3010. There used to be a road between those two buildings that are now connected. The city shut down the road, and then we built this, whatever you call it. And one of the things you'll find is like where the grassy garden is, where we have a Noguchi sculpture. That was the old road. But anyhow, so these are important. So maybe we should just go ahead and start talking about this issue. Maybe I reached out to both of you. I talked to Douglas of this. Should we be concerned that the mayor is considering privatization of NYCHA and you said that it's not so much that he's thinking about it, but just as a, putting all New York City mayors on notice that this is interesting. You want to start talking a little bit about this?
Yeah, I just want to say before Doug, you speak, that I do believe Eric Adams has our best interest at heart. I do believe that he will not compromise his morals and his humanity, for the benefit of profit. There are many that will push and pull him in different directions for their own benefit. But coming from where he's come from and his background, we are hopeful that Eric Adams will do the right thing by us. And we are just using this petition opportunity to encourage him and let him know that we are here to support him, to support us in this fight.
All right. Douglas, did you want to chime in a little bit about this?
Sure, thanks. I think that our emphasis in the fight is that it's citywide. So I think much of the advocacy in New York relative to public housing has kept the fight within the residents community, the community of NYCHA residents. And we are out on the streets talking to people throughout the city. So I think first and foremost, it's a citywide effort to establish the only real affordable housing, which is public housing, because public housing is based on a 30% cap on people's gross incomes. So if your income goes down or goes up, your rent fluctuates accordingly. It's important that cities that have public housing because, as you and Brenda have pointed out, affordable housing is very critical to people to lead productive lives and be active citizens without adding the stress of being out on the streets. Privatization, which is expressed through the rental assistance demonstration program, PACT, or the newer program, the Blueprint, is now putting control and management of public housing in the hands of the private sector, and their job is to make as much money as they possibly can for their investors. So it's a bit of an irony that now we're having the private sector make a substantial profit on people, by and large, lower income, some middle income people who live in public housing. So that's our fight, and I think keeping it citywide and expanding it makes the point that public housing is important to New York City.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just did a quick search on NYCHA, and of course NYCHA began in the LaGuardia administration, 1935, at the height of the Depression, which is not surprising.
Yeah.
I won't get into Robert Moses' role in that, but there's one of my colleagues who is in the marketing department is retiring this Friday, and lives in Stuytown, whatever, Stuyvesant Village, is it? There, 14th Street and the West Side High and the East Side, or FDR Drive, and I remember him being involved in trying to prevent what was going on there, and I don't know what the status of that is at this time. Are you aware of what's been happening in that particular NYCHA, originally a NYCHA community, right?
Stuyvesant Town was established by an insurance company as a place for soldiers and their families to go post-war in the 40s, 50s. It was sold to a developer, I believe maybe 10, 15 years ago. I have some friends who live there as well. And it's been to some degree gentrified. Rents have gone up, improvements have been made. But it was not public housing.
It's never been that, so that's not NYCHA housing.
No, never.
Okay.
That's
if we were going to do in the general area right around LaGuardia, what's our NYCHA housing? Brenda, you actually grew up in, was it Ravenswood? Is that the name of the community?
Yes, I grew up in Ravenswood, and we have Queensbridge, which is even closer to LaGuardia. Astoria projects and Woodside projects. So there are 4 or 5 different projects, public housing projects in that area of Long Island City and Astoria. And I just wanted to say that the reason why I was able to go to college in the first place was because of the location of LaGuardia Community College and the fact that I lived in public housing and I was able to afford that low tuition. Otherwise, I couldn't have gone away to college at the time because I wasn't privy to a scholarship. So I was very grateful. And I know that a lot of people in public housing, are graduates of LaGuardia Community College and are attending LaGuardia Community College and the other community colleges that are in the area in the 5 boroughs. A lot of us, I mean, that's the perfect solution for people coming out of public housing that are strapped for cash and that are just living paycheck to paycheck. Without public housing, we wouldn't be able to move up and move out, have the opportunities to move up and move out. And so that's why we're fighting so hard to keep public housing public, because I live out here in, I started out in Ravenswood. I moved out and I moved to Lefrak City. And in my journey, I had some systemic racism things happening, a Me Too things happening, life happening. What I should have done was go back to LaGuardia Community College and get some assistance. I'm telling you. And that's what people need to do. Remember that they can always go back and get assistance in terms of counseling, mental health services, or whatever other type of financial services, because they do offer that. I didn't do that, and I'm back in public housing, which is a blessing in disguise. I was able to come back here and, start my community activism, and in a place where I can afford to live, stability and comfort. Where I live, it's a quality of life over here. I mean, we do have struggles in maintenance in different areas, but they can be overcome if the residents had more of a say, like resident management, more of a say in what goes on with NYCHA, and we can get these things done. And let me say that since COVID, NYCHA has stepped up and they have done a lot of things that they said they couldn't do before. And I'm seeing that a lot of improvements are being done without privatization and without, these other outside resources. So we're asking for the funding, so that NYCHA can stay public. And like I said, this is an opportunity for people to come up and out. And if you stop the everyday people that are the backbone of this society, from having opportunities, where are we to go? The private sector wants to take over and make a profit off of us. And we are everyday people that need a place to live, to feel, deal, and heal from everyday stressors. And so that's why I'm here. That's why I'm passionate. And I just believe that it ties in together, community college, free tuition, affordable housing, low-income housing, public housing.
It's interesting you mentioned, someone else who grew up in Ravenswood is now a, professor working. He's on the tenure track. Jason Hendrickson, who is one of my colleagues.
Yes.
I work with him in the faculty and staff of color. He's also an English professor, and we're also working on developing an Africana Studies program here at the college. But he grew up in Ravenswood and used to come to LaGuardia with his mother. I can't remember whether she was studying here or what her role was here, but so he's somebody who, again, is came from NYCHA Housing and LaGuardia, and is a success story.
I just want to mention 2 other success stories in my family. 3 generations of us have come through LaGuardia Community College. I graduated with course stenography. My mother came in. I brought my mother in for a smoking cessation certificate program. And she stopped smoking. After many years of smoking, she was in her 50s. She came in and took the smoking cessation course. And so she was successful with that. And then I have my nephew, Jordan Temple. He's a writer. He He came through LaGuardia Community College. He's a writer now. He's in Hollywood, and he's on Abbott Elementary as a producer and a writer. So those are
Well, we should talk to him
three
for our film
generations.
and television program.
I'll get in touch
We're
with
going to
him.
just take a, yeah, I would love to talk to him. I'm actually going to just take a quick station break. The show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez. And my guests today are here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. And my guests today are Brenda Temple and Douglas Balder of the Committee for Independent Community Action. Brenda's a LaGuardia alumna, and along with Mr. Balder, we're talking about a petition they've created to share with New York City Mayor Eric Adams concerning not allowing the privatization of New York City housing properties. I wanted to give Douglas a chance to say some things. First of all, you're talking about all, Brenda was mentioning all of these improvements. I wonder how much of that had to do with federal dollars coming from, all the issues around COVID to afford the housing authority the ability to make these repairs. But you want to talk, in particulars about the petition and what it's asking for. When a person signs this petition, what does it say?
This is our kind of a draft version of our latest petition talking points. But the petition essentially is, as Brenda was saying, it's a supportive petition to the mayor. So we began collecting signatures for three items that we're calling the mayor to act on. One is to oppose any further privatization of public housing. The second is to keep public housing Section 9. The privatization turns Section 9 public housing into Section 8 housing, which is effectively a private form of housing, and to appoint a new NYCHA chair. Of all the appointments that the mayor has made to date, the chair of NYCHA remains in place that was appointed by the former mayor. And then lastly, to support resident management corporations. This is a device created by HUD, Housing and Urban Development, in 1971, recognizing that residents can do a much better job than any manager can of managing their own developments, their own buildings. And there is a way that residents can create a management structure that they themselves would be in charge of. So those three items are what we're asking the mayor to act on.
And how much of NYCHA housing has been privatized in whatever number of years in the past decades?
Well, in New York City, there's 173 roughly housing units on NYCHA. And to date, close to 15,000 have been privatized. That was a goal set by the end of 2021 by the former mayor. And the current chair of NYCHA is tasked with privatizing under what's called rental assistance demonstration, or otherwise known as PACT in New York City, 62 of the 173,000, 62,000. And there's a plan that's being considered by the state legislature, the current mayor, and HUD to privatize the balance of 110,000 units or 111,000 units of housing as a way to finance the repairs.
And this is really, to obfuscate the fact that there's money to be made in the privatization of public housing. The argument that's being used is that it would be better managed by private folks than the way it's currently being, the way NYCHA is currently being run, or the facilities are being run. Is this the argument that's being used by the privatizers?
This is the nefarious scheme that's being used. Okay,
in order for that.
Right.
You're free to say that because you're the opposition. I'm trying to.
Well, the argument is that if the Citizens Budget Commission, for example, a few years ago said, if nothing is done to public housing by 2027, it ought to be condemned and torn down. So how much control or power the Citizens Budget Commission has is another story. there's the conditions are deplorable. No one should have to live in public housing in most of public housing in the current conditions. It would be closed down if a private landlord was housing people in the current public housing, and it was private. It would be shut down by the building department until it was renovated and fixed. So because it's not the private sector, it's the public sector that has been allowed to go on. The thinking is that the private sector, if it's incentivized, will fix the housing, whereas NYCHA is incompetent. Some would say NYCHA is corrupt. It doesn't have the resources to fix public housing. So you turn it over to the private sector, you incentivize the private sector, and they'll fix it. And I just wanted to add, and maybe we could unpack this a little bit. If you look at the managers who have come in New York City, it's much more opaque in terms of repairs. They're not being made as promised. The fixes are very superficial. Many who know the building industry have said that these are not 30 or 40-year repairs. They're 10-year, maybe 15-year repairs. They'll have to be done again because they're underfunded, over profited.
Yes.
And that's how the money's being made, by the repairs being somewhat superficial. They're superficial.
Yes. Can I say something about
No, of
Ocean
course.
Bay?
Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
So I live in Oceanside, which is right across the street from Ocean Bay development. At one time, we were called Edgemere, and we were all one development here in the Rockaways. So I guess about 5 years ago, these people, I guess Waycrest Management, which is now part of Ocean Bay, which they took over Ocean Edgemere, and they call it Ocean Bay now. They came at their PowerPoint presentations, making everything seem so wonderful, how they were going to do all these repairs and fixing, and things were going to be brand new. They came in, and I know for a fact, because I have friends that are on the other side. Now we call it the other side. It's almost like we're no longer connected as we used to be. But they let me know that the floors were inferior tiles. They're still popping up. They're cheap. The cabinets on the doors are falling apart. And the color of the paint is like a silent green, type of a white green that has this hue that, is probably some kind of a mental type of I don't know, side effect of something. But as well as the fact that over the years, Ocean Bay has had more evictions than all of New York City housing in 1 year. Only that one development, Ocean Bay, has had more evictions than all of New York City housing. That's what they want. The thing is that NYCHA is in cahoots with, I guess, whoever, these private developers and whatever's going on to make money. And they purposely allowed the neglect, to go on to the extent where they're, reaching out for extra help. And it's just a plot, a plan. And a lot of people are being displaced, evicted, and a lot of families are being dismantled. And it's so inhumane. And that's why we're here, and we're fighting back, and we're asking for everyone who cares, whether you live in NYCHA or not, if you care, for people that are the backbone of the society. Your teachers, aides, your security workers, your cooks, your cleaners, maintenance workers, all of us. We take care of your children. We take care of your parents. We clean your parents' bed sores. We're there for you when you're out there working your job and making your money each and every day. We need a place to live too, a decent place to live. And we need all of your support, all hands on deck. This is a crisis.
A few things come to mind. One reminds me of during the Reagan years, there was a phrase they used to use called starving the beast. And it was this technique that the Republicans used to basically underfund a program to the point that it fails. and then you can make the
That's it.
case for getting rid of that program.
Okay.
That's one technique. The other thing that you were talking about is the recent fire in the Bronx, which I don't know whether or not that was NYCHA housing, but my
No.
understanding was that the fire was caused by a space heater. And the question becomes, why do you need a space heater in a building that should be heated? And so this has a way of contributing to a lot of problems. I lived in Fort Greene for a little while, and I remember going to the park, and on one side of the park is this area that's been exploding, right? The Fort Greene area. But then all around those areas are NYCHA housing. And I kept thinking to myself, how is this going to work? Because I know that the real estate machine, the gentrification machine, it doesn't stop. And so when it abuts itself against this, how are they going to resolve that? And the only solution that I came to mind was that they're probably going to try to privatize it and run people out and gentrify these buildings. And is this a concern as well because of what happened in New York? Until COVID came along, New York was out of control as far as real estate is concerned, both private and the commercial real estate. And so have a lot of these issues been heightened by this surge in affordability? Douglas?
Yeah, I think that what you're identifying, Hugo, is sort of the tactic that attracts developers who want to take over the management of public housing. You can ask yourself, well, why are there developers who want to take over what is arguably a lower profit margin than, say, if you were to stick with market rate housing? But I think a lot of what you're identifying is transitions for incremental increases in rents that these developers can create in public housing through evictions, because NYCHA is not enforcing what goes on the ground. The devil is always in the details. So if the developers are taking over Ocean Bay, and Wavecrest has a terrible track record, it's a slumlord in the Bronx. Its schedules are opaque in Ocean Bay, and there's less transparency than there was under NYCHA. If you can increase those rents a slight bit, the neighborhoods can really transition. Services become more upscale. People can't afford them. People can't afford to buy food anymore in their neighborhood. And if they're able to, have to travel great distances to shop. And then that paves the way for adjacent properties to be sold at a higher price. And then you do see this kind of gentrification spread. So there is, and real estate is aggregated. It's not, when you walk down the street, you look at an empty building and you think to yourself, well, how does that work? How does the landlord make money on an empty building? It's because that building is part of an aggregate, a REIT, R-E-I-T, aggregate of many buildings. And investors are taking 30 and 40 and 50-year outlooks on making their money. The real estate market isn't any longer understood by the ordinary person as you pay your rent and then the building is, occupied, or if it's vacant, it shouldn't work. But in fact, it does work for this kind of real estate aggregating of buildings. So I think that's the world we live in New York City, particularly. And residents are going up against that.
Yeah, when you were talking, all I could think about was the old John Jacob Astor quote when he was dying, and they asked him, if you could have done anything differently, what would you have done? And he just said, buy more land.
Right.
So
Right.
we're coming close to the last quarter hour. I want to point out a couple of things. One is that people can ask questions on the in the Twitch stream if they become members. We've got some folks watching. Dr. Riccio, our station manager, has put a link, the tiny URL link to the petition as well if folks want to go on and take a look at it, possibly even sign it. But we usually take this last quarter hour again for questions or talking about the future. So I know that you've gotten a certain number of signatures, right, Brenda? And I guess I'm wondering, what are the next steps here?
Okay,
With the
so
petition?
thank you. We received 20,000 signatures on a petition that went to Mayor de Blasio, asking him to stop the privatization or not to support the privatization. That was a couple of years ago, 20,000 plus. So right now we just started with the mayor-elect. Well, we called him mayor-elect in the last petition that we had, and we received, I think it was 2,000 signatures. And so now that he's the mayor, officially a mayor, we have new petitions out. And so we're starting over again to collect them. And we're excited about, everybody that's coming on board and becoming woke, so to speak, about what's going on and coming out to join the fight.
So this is an ongoing process. And where do you target? Where do you look for these signatures? I mean, are you going directly to the NYCHA sites to try to get folks who live there to sign, or are you? I mean, I know you targeted, for example, you came to LaGuardia,
right?
Because during what was going on with our protest, I
Doug,
signed it.
yes, thank you. We got a lot of
But
signatures that day. I think there were three of us. I got about 100 signatures that day. It was very busy because I know that you had the other agenda, which, we were just glad that people can connect, the two together and support us as well as we supporting, the free tuition. But Doug, go ahead and let them know all the places that we've been and we're going.
Well, we have the online, but the online petition it's great if people, particularly in during a pandemic. But we are out at events, health day events in the Bronx, Harlem, Brooklyn. We have people who will be on the Staten Island Ferry this coming Saturday. So we are going to public housing developments. Yeah, it could be, Grant Houses, Frederick Douglass. We're going to events that are on the streets. Most of our work is outdoors, obviously due to the pandemic. And we're also reaching out to residents of public housing to carry petitions in their developments throughout the city.
yeah, I just wanted to make a point that when Brenda was talking about, coming out and we had our agenda and you have yours. For me, they're all one agenda, which is because, for example, I serve on the Board of Trustees for CUNY in the Student Affairs Committee, and I've had dealings with the facilities folks, and I'd had the mind to make the case for emergency student housing, because whether people know it or not, many of our students are homeless, living in shelters. When a student loses housing, it's pretty much enough to derail the semester. A lot of our students have families, so now they're on top of it. They're trying to find housing for their families, and since CUNY represents New York City, and you take a look at what the numbers are for homelessness based on the population, you can extrapolate and say, okay, well then the same percentages hold. CUNY has 250,000 students full time, maybe twice that. As adult and continuing education students. And so for me, housing is as important as a scholarship, is as important as students being able to take public transportation to get to school, to have a place for their child to be taken care of, and to be able to afford food. We have students who have to make choices between going to school or eating, and that shouldn't be the case. So this is all really, and it'd be interesting to find out what the percentage of students in CUNY are NYCHA residents. I would guess the number's high.
And I would really wish that LaGuardia Community College can have a hub or an annex out here in Far Rockaway, because we are so far from everything. We're like an education, a college desert out here.
Well, you have
And
Kingsborough, don't you? You have Kingsborough
Kingsborough,
Community College. Is
we're in
that near Far
Queens.
Rock? Right, but Kingsborough is in Far Rockaway, I thought. No?
It's
Some people call it a commuter because it's easier to drive there than it is. I mean, you have to take a bus. There is no
it's
train that gets you there.
they call some parts of Brooklyn Far Rockaway, but it really isn't.
Right.
Really isn't. We're very far from everything, and it would really help if we could. And we're fighting to have some type of a community college or a training programs out here. In one building, like a community college, so that people can get off their, get on their feet and be educated and provide for their families, move up and move on and move out. But I will say that Assemblyman Khalil Anderson has been a great source of support for us in terms of supporting public housing in Section 9. And we are just trying to get the Queensborough president to be on board. It seems as though he's in the pocket of a lot of the private developers, and we're very disappointed in that. But, we are hoping that people have a change of heart, because that's possible. And that's what we can do, is hope. We can come out, we can lift our voices. We don't rely on the elected officials, because I know that they're strapped sometimes in their decision making and compromising. But we do need the residents, some of the 400,000 residents of public housing and those that care, to come out and to come out in number and make these changes. We can do it.
And we're coming to about the last 5 minutes, so I wanted to give you an opportunity. Anything you feel like we haven't talked about, or any other folks you would like to thank before we're done. Douglas, would you like to start?
Yeah, I was thinking about your comments about how all of these things are really one issue. And so, I mean, you can look at the political process in New York City. We live in a city where 2 million voters are disenfranchised because we have a closed primary system. One of the focuses, so by virtue of the closed primary system, if you're registered as an independent, or you're a so-called blank voter in New York City, or don't choose to register with the Democratic or Republican parties, you're locked out of the primaries. And that's where, decisions, basically, whoever wins the primary, particularly in the Democratic Party, will go on to win the general election. And both parties are supportive of closed primaries, and that's disenfranchised over 2 million voters in New York. We have taken on resident management control as a democracy issue, self-governance issue, with privatization. So we are against the privatization, but we're very much for residents running their own buildings. And there is a mechanism to do that. And I think that is something we're also feel with the privatization issue. That's one issue. And if we could have a more sort of an environment for democracy in New York City, a greater environment, I think it would address what you're, I think, correctly describing as really one issue, which is the disenfranchisement of many New Yorkers from all the things that people need to be able to live productive lives.
Yes, and I'd like to say, in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, a quote: "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." So I'm asking everyone that's hearing this to speak with others, share this information, sign the petition, get involved with Committee for Independent Community Action, or as well as any other organization that's fighting against privatization at any form. Support public housing, Section 9.
Yes, Dr. King, and one of the things that I don't know if people realize how much at the end he realized the importance of the economic issues, and that were involved with the social issues, with the racial issues, and the the final event that he was not able to attend, and he was assassinated, was specifically in Washington D.C. was focused on economic issues. And this is a fight that we continue, and folks say, yes, let's celebrate Dr. King's birthday, but let's do it by taking action.
That's
and
right.
continuing to fight for those things
Yes.
that he believed in. We're almost out of time, so I just want to thank you both for being on the show, for talking about this important issue. I want to invite you back if you'd like to come back, talk about progress, and again, talk a little bit about, if you want Brenda, talk again if you remember some more things about LaGuardia and your days. But I just want to say that today, the show, What's Going On, I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, and my guests today have been Brenda Temple and Douglas Balder of the Committee for Independent Community Action. Brenda is a LaGuardia alumna, and along with Mr. Balder, we've been talking about a petition that they have created to share with our new New York City Mayor, Eric Adams, to discuss, or to fight against the privatization of New York City Housing Authority properties.
Yes.
Thank you both for being on the
Thanks,
show.
Hugo. We'd love
Thank
to come
you.
back.
Nights Your Lives
Thank you very
Matter.
much.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And the hour goes quickly, doesn't it? So
Yes, it does. Thank you so much for this platform.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
And we're going to go out the way we came in. My engineer, Mr. Pope, play a little more Talking Heads for us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.